Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. I just wanted to take a moment to discuss something that's induced some confusion in our comments and in general, and that's the difference between living historians, reenactors, and what we do with our videos and matches. A living historian or a reenactor has a requirement to be intimately familiar with every little button and every piece of their kit and gear because they're actually trying to represent a specific thing. They're doing something important. They're preserving history in a way that's different than our focus. So a living historian will go out to an event and reenact a battle. Will maybe live there for a few days. They have to know how to set up a Zeltbahn properly, or how to set up a U.S. tent properly, or how to properly dig a trench or a dugout or a fighting hole, and then they live in that for a certain duration of time, and maybe teach history to other people, or just enjoy the experience of what the history was like to live in that time and place, in that gear, in that environment. And so in that process, there may be educating other people. When people come out, they want to see that kit and that gear. And they're actually specifically, intentionally representing a specific unit or a specific division or a specific battle group. And with what we're doing with the matches and InRange in general, isn't that. We're trying to experience the important elements of what the gear was like for the individual soldier fighting and using it in a practical, combative environment. Now, obviously a match is not real world. We're not being shot at, but we do have a timer. We have people watching us. As Pat McNamara likes to say, dudes watching dudes. And trying to use historical equipment in that environment is the best we can get to testing that out. And so when you read a book or a memoir and you hear something about a rifle or something about a piece of kit, or you hear that something happened in a specific fight, it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to try it out under that clock in our match. And our match being fairly physically oriented and pretty strenuous and tough on the gear and the people, depending on the time of year. It's hot here in summer. We learn a lot that we would never learn just plinking with the rifle or just shooting a handgun on a square range or shooting at pop cans in the desert. It doesn't teach you the same thing. Going out there and using the gun under the clock and trying to compete against people with more modern equipment teaches you unfathomable amounts of information and data. And in fact, we're finding things out that just is astonishingly consistent with some of the historical record, things we didn't even think about. But on that note, it isn't important for me to do that and to learn those lessons about that gear and shooting in those practical environments by having the exactly proper kit. What I do is I assimilate the kit and I get the important parts right, and the important parts are what matter. For example, helmets matter dramatically. A helmet, when you're shooting with this under the clock and running and going prone or jumping over a wall, the different countries' helmets make a huge difference. As we saw in a World War I match where Ian was wearing one of the Brody helmets, that thing was getting in his way badly. It was getting in his vision, spinning around on his head and causing him to shoot worse. We have a German helmet here. I've shot in those before, not in that one in particular, but I've shot in the 1918 Stahl helm, or 1916 Stahl helm, and that I found out to be quite comfortable until I went prone and then it hit the nape of my neck and pushed it into my eyes. I just recently shot in this USGI steel pot and found it to be fantastic, actually. It's comfortable as a steel pot on your head can be, and it also was really stayed on without the straps choking me under my throat, didn't fall off, and really didn't get in my way at all, with the exception of just noticing there's a little extra weight on my head. This shirt, this is what they call a safari shooting shirt. Pocket for pocket, it's 90% the equivalent of a paratrooper jacket that was used in 1944. Is it a paratrooper reproduction jacket? No, it's not, and here's why. Before I did this event, I went and looked, and the reproduction paratrooper jacket and pants cost about $200. It was like $170 to get both of those pieces. And since I'm not a living historian or a reenactor exactly, paying almost $200 for a jacket and a pair of pants that I'm probably going to tear up at the match. A lot of that reenactment gear isn't really built to last. Some of it is, and that's even more expensive, but the low-end stuff, even though it's expensive, isn't built that tough. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But then when you find this safari jacket that pocket for pocket is really close to the original paratrooper jacket, and then I've got, why bother? I mean, I can use this, I can use it in other events, I can continue to shoot with it, and I spent $60 on this, not $180 or whatever the heck the reenactment stuff was. I've got Cry Precision pants on. Granted, obviously, 1944 paratroopers did not have Cry Precision pants, nor did they have Danner boots, they had jump boots. those are things that are also expensive. And another reason I'm not doing this is I'm not testing my knees. I damaged my right knee at a match years ago, and it's pretty messed up, and I feel it when I'm moving on it. It's gotten better with my gym work and such, but it's still a problem. So having those knee pads embedded in there makes sense for me. I'm not trying to test myself or physically harm myself. At the same time, the paratrooper kit from the time, they reinforced the knees and the elbows, and so having reinforced knees, while not necessarily as the highest quality of precision, precision reinforced knee pads, still it's a similar mindset. They wear the same. The pockets are, again, oddly, really close to the same. And the boots, well, I'm not going to be standing in a mud trench for 3 weeks or hiking across Europe, so it's really not relevant. We're not testing that. They're just boots to keep my feet from getting messed up at the match. But the things that matter, for example, the steel pot, I already mentioned that. The rifle, I already mentioned that. Now, this is representative of a 1945 era gun. Would have been cooler to have one from 44 with the proper sight and no bayonet lug, but it is what it is. We got this at a steal of a price. We'll explain that in another video. But what's also important, the belt. The belt is a proper belt, period, correct. Don't know what's happened to the color over time. It's a little bit more khaki than you would normally expect, but this is a legitimate, proper belt. Proper magazine pouch that actually snaps into the belt. A med kit, which if you look at pictures from World War II, these guys had these things swimming around. They had them in different locations. It wasn't necessarily something specific. However, so instead of where a reenactor, for example, would have a Reenactor Med Kit in here that's historically correct to World War II, I have an Israeli pressure bandage. Well, why? Well, it's a med kit. I'm at a match. We're shooting guns. No one's ever really gotten hurt at our match, not with anything significant. But you know what? Why not have a real bandage in there that I know how to use rather than some reenactor thing that may or may not be viable if you actually needed it in a real medical emergency. Other examples of where this kind of stuff matters. So, this is a trench knife. Regular 1918 period trench knife. A lot of people think those were used in World War I by the Americans, but they were not. They were actually used in World War II by the Americans. And so when I was setting up my ersatz paratrooper kit here, I took a bayonet scabbard, which was common at the time. They did this in World War II. Shoved it in there, it fit perfectly, put it on my belt, and then it sat here on my leg and it was killing me. This thing was tearing into me. The guard on the 1918 knife was just beating my leg up and was in the way, and you couldn't properly sheath it. And I've seen pictures of guys running around with these sheathed in a bayonet scabbard. And so I was wondering what's going on, did a little research. Lo and behold, what do I find? Pictures from an auction house, more than one, a couple different 1918 trench knives, in which during the war, 1943-44 I'm assuming, someone ground off the actual guard to make it thinner on the sides and in the front so it would fit in the scabbard and not beat their leg up. Well, this is a reproduction trench knife. Paid a whopping $30 for it. It's functionally equivalent. I don't know that it's as durable, but it certainly would do damage. That said, who cares? 30 bucks? I ground it off with a grinder and made essentially a World War II version of the 1918 trench knife. You wouldn't do that with an original. You also wouldn't want to crawl through the dirt with an original. So here's an example of where I learned a lesson about period use of a specific piece of equipment by trying to use it at my match. Here's another example. This is actually an original, World War I, in fact, canteen cover. It's a little bit torn right here and here, but it's still functional enough. It doesn't show any significant damage, so I went ahead and risked it and will continue to use it through the matches. However, the canteen, it's just a plastic USGI canteen, a modern one. I could have an aluminum in there. I didn't spend the money on it yet, although I did use it for my water at the match, and so I still have that weight flopping around. And when you see the match with me in this kit, this thing is flopping around pretty bad. So those are just examples of how getting close to the historical accuracy of the kit still teaches us lessons about what it's like to use the gear in that environment. Got a couple more examples for you of where that's not exactly relevant. So we got a K98 here, this captured gun. Well, this is a fantastic K98. It's a BCD from 1944. It's got a ZF41 scope mount on it, so we can use it as a DMR rifle in that if we wanted to. However, the original stock that this gun came in was starting to crack. It was failing here and at the recoil lug. So I got a replacement stock. It's a Yugoslavian replacement. It's obviously post-war. You can tell because it's got this reinforcement lug right here. Yugoslavians did this commonly. So does this make this gun any less equivalent in a practical shooting environment on the clock than a Kar 98 in the original Kar 98 stock? No, it doesn't do a damn thing to the functionality of the gun. It allows me to shoot it in the environment I'm shooting it in and not worry about breaking the gun. So you couldn't do this at a living history event or in a reenactment because it's not correct. But for our purposes and trying to understand what it's like to use this gear under stress, totally irrelevant. Doesn't matter at all. And you know, the reason I'm using this car as a prop today is this car is an example of that. Yeah, this car was made in 1974. It's the direct equivalent of the World War II Kugelwagen. Well, if you learn to maintain this car and drive this car, is it exactly the same as the experience as being in a 1940 Kugelwagen? No, it isn't. However, it's darn close, and you'll be surprised by how close that actually is. So when you're driving around in this, jumping out of it, got duck boards underneath your feet, you're learning something about the historical experience of using it. Anyways, I just wanted to take a moment out to talk about this. We have some videos coming up in the near future, one with me in this paratrooper kit, shooting an M1 carbine. I got another one where I'm wearing a smock and a German field hat, and I'm shooting my Lage submachine gun set up in the guise of an MP40. What I mean by that is it's running at the same rate of fire as an MP40. I've got the MP40 pouches, the German Y straps, and what we're trying to learn there is what's it like to use a 550, 600 round per minute submachine gun with iron sights using MP40 mags. I was using MP40 mags in the match with MP40 load bearing kit in a practical environment. So is that an MP40? No, I can't afford a $25,000 MP40. Luckily, I can afford that Lage setup. So in that regard, we find out a lot of things from that. We learn things from that match as well, and that video's coming up. So anyways, just want to take a moment to explain the difference between living history and reenactors and what I guess we'd call historical shooting events. You don't see a lot of people doing this. It confuses some folks. The reenactors don't get it because we're not in full reenactment kit, and the competitive shooters don't get it because it seems like we're hurting our score. Well, score's cool and we want to do well at the match, but what's more important is learning those lessons of history. Oh, one final note. One thing I never do while wearing any of this gear is wear actual unit patches, medals, anything that represents a specific person, a specific act of valor, a specific earning, or a specific piece of merit, because no matter what country we're representing in the video, whether I'm shooting as an American paratrooper or a Deutsche Soldaten in 1944 or a Soviet soldier coming over the hill, we're interested in the military exploits of these men and what they were able to accomplish in conflict and in battle as warriors, not the politics, not the specifics. So wearing a unit patch starts bringing those things in. I'm not part of the 101st Airborne. I didn't earn that patch. I'm not going to wear that patch. I don't wear medals because I didn't earn those medals. I wasn't there for that, and nor do I have that affiliation. And on the last note, the politics that keep coming up on this. People keep thinking, well, you shoot a lot in German gear. Are like, you're a Nazi. It's ridiculous. We're not interested in that. Like I said, the point of this effort and these endeavors at InRange is to learn about the historical use of these weapons and gear and the exploits, military exploits of these men, regardless of what country they fought for. Using a K98 with a smock in a match makes you no more a Nazi than using a US M1 Garand turns you into a neo-deal socialist. Most of these soldiers had no idea what any of that meant. They were told to go fight, and they did. And so that's what our interest is here. That's it. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this kind of stuff, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Full30. And we do have also an InRange TV page on Facebook if you want to follow us there. We post little snippets and things there as well. Thanks again. See you next time.